The day Elijah Harris played piano with one hand, the world finally opened its eyes. For 9 years, blindness had defined him. A small black boy from a rough neighborhood with a gift nobody recognized. Then came the cruel dismissal from Langston Rowe, celebrated pianist turned reality show judge, who mocked Elijah's raw talent on national television. But in that moment of public humiliation, something ignited. Under the guidance of Dr. Penelope Nash, a reclusive former virtuoso with secrets of her own, Elijah returned to face his tormentor. As his fingers moved across the keys, creating sounds that made strangers weep, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't just a child playing notes. This was music in its purest form, breaking through barriers of privilege, sight, and expectation. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The upright piano sat in the corner of the Westside Community Center, dust collecting on its worn wooden frame. Most days, it remained untouched as children raced around the room, their laughter and shouts filling the air. But today was different. As the afternoon activities wound down, a small figure made his way across the room, white cane tapping methodically against the linoleum floor. 9-year-old Elijah Harris moved with quiet confidence, following the sound of the old piano like it was calling to him. The noise around him gradually faded as staff and remaining children paused to watch the blind boy navigate to the instrument. His fingers found the edge of the bench first. Then he carefully settled himself, running his hands gently over the keys. For a moment, he sat perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then his fingers began to dance across the keys, and the opening notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room. The melody flowed without hesitation, without sheet music, without a single mistake. The community center workers froze in place, mouths slightly open. "Who taught him that?" whispered Ms. Jackson, the center's director, to no one in particular. "Nobody here," replied Mr. Wilson, the maintenance man. "I've never seen him touch that piano before today." Elijah continued playing, lost in the music, unaware of the small audience gathering behind him. His face lit with a serene joy that transformed his ordinary features into something beautiful. When the final notes faded away, he simply sat, hands resting lightly on the keys, a small smile playing on his lips. "You killed it back there, little man," Dwayne said, his large hand resting on Elijah's shoulder as they walked home. At 23, Dwayne towered over his young cousin, his broad shoulders and watchful eyes serving as a shield as they navigated the rough streets of their neighborhood. Sirens wailed in the distance, and somewhere down the block, angry voices rose in argument. Dwayne subtly adjusted their path, steering Elijah away from potential trouble. "It wasn't that good," Elijah replied, but his shy smile betrayed his pride. "I messed up the middle part." "Nobody noticed but you," Dwayne insisted. He guided Elijah around a crack in the sidewalk. "You got a gift, real talk." They passed a group of young men loitering on the corner, and Dwayne nodded in silent acknowledgement. Several of them had once run in his crew, back before his stint in juvenile detention had changed his path. The men nodded back, giving Elijah curious glances but maintaining a respectful distance. "This place eats geniuses alive if no one protects them," Dwayne said quietly after they'd passed. "That's why I'm always going to have your back, you understand?" Elijah nodded, his cane sweeping in practiced arcs before him. "I understand." The apartment Elijah shared with his mother was small, but meticulously clean. The furniture was worn but well cared for, and family photos adorned the walls. Maureen Harris moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing dinner, despite the obvious exhaustion that dragged at her movements. "How was the center today?" she asked, setting a plate of spaghetti in front of Elijah. "Good," he said simply. "I found a piano." Maureen paused, a flicker of something. Worry, perhaps, or memory crossing her face. "You played?" Elijah nodded, feeling for his fork. "Just a little." Maureen watched her son eat, her eyes soft with love and concern. At 34, she looked older, her face lined with the strain of raising a child alone while working double shifts as a nurse's aide. Bills were stacked on the counter, several marked with red final notice stamps. "Homework finished?" she asked, sitting down with her own plate. "Yes, ma'am," Elijah answered. "Ms. Peterson says I'm reading 2 grade levels ahead." Pride warmed Maureen's tired face. "That's my boy." Later, after Elijah had gone to bed, Maureen sorted through the bills, calculator in hand, trying to make the numbers work. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional siren outside and the low murmur of the TV she kept on for company. In Elijah's room, a shaft of moonlight fell across his sleeping face. Born 3 months premature, his tiny body had fought to survive while complications damaged his optic nerves. His father had walked out 2 weeks after the diagnosis, unable to handle the reality of a disabled son. But Maureen had never seen Elijah's blindness as tragedy, only challenge. "You're going to be something special," she had whispered to him in the NICU. 9 years later, she still believed it. Sunday morning found the Harris family at New Hope Baptist Church, Elijah wearing his one good dress shirt and Maureen in a modest blue dress. The congregation swayed to the gospel choir, energy filling the modest sanctuary. When the choir finished their final number, the pastor stepped forward. "Before we dismiss, I'd like to invite young Elijah Harris to come and bless us with a selection." Maureen looked surprised as congregants turned toward them with encouraging smiles. Elijah hesitated. "Go on," she whispered. "If you want to." He made his way to the piano independently, settling himself on the bench as the church grew quiet. For a moment his fingers hovered over the keys. Then he began to play. What started as a traditional gospel piece gradually transformed, melding seamlessly into something else, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, but reinterpreted with gospel undertones. The congregation sat transfixed as Elijah wove the classical piece with spirals of improvisation, creating something entirely new. In the back row, a woman held up her phone, recording the performance with tears streaming down her face. When Elijah finished, the church erupted in applause and amens. Maureen sat stunned, watching her son bow his head shyly before making his way back to her side. "When did you learn that?" she whispered. Elijah shrugged. "I didn't learn it. I just heard it." That night, the woman from church uploaded the video to her social media account with the caption, "This blind boy will take your breath away." For 3 days, it sat virtually unnoticed. Then a music teacher in Detroit shared it. A jazz musician in New Orleans reposted it. A local news blog picked it up. Slowly, the views climbed. 3,000, 10,000, 30,000. Dwayne burst into Maureen's apartment waving his phone. "Have you seen this? He's going viral." Maureen, just home from a 12-hour shift, looked bewildered as Dwayne showed her the view count and comments. "This is a sign," Dwayne insisted. "He needs to audition for that TV show. Soundstage. They're holding tryouts for kids next month." "Absolutely not," Maureen said firmly. "That's not the life I want for him. Those shows chew people up and spit them out. But this could be his ticket out," Dwayne argued. "A chance at a better life for both of you." The answer is no. Maureen's tone left no room for debate. "I won't let them make a spectacle of him." 2 weeks later, Dwayne sat at his kitchen table, filling out an online application. Soundstage, America's Next Virtuoso, glowed on his laptop screen. He hesitated over the parental consent form, then carefully forged Maureen's signature. "Sorry, Auntie," he muttered. "But somebody's got to give this kid a shot." He called in favors from former crew members. One who now worked as a chauffeur lent him a suit. Another who'd gone into retail helped secure an outfit for Elijah. The pieces fell into place, and on a crisp Saturday morning, Dwayne showed up. "At Maureen's apartment, taking E to the Science Museum," he announced casually. "They've got a special exhibit for visually impaired kids." Maureen, exhausted from another night shift, nodded gratefully. "Be back by dinner." In the car, Dwayne finally told Elijah the truth. "We're going to audition for Soundstage." Elijah's face drained of color. "Mom said no." Sometimes adults need a little push, Dwayne replied. This is your chance, E. What if I'm not good enough? Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. What if what I play isn't even real music? Dwayne pulled the car over and turned to face his cousin. Listen to me. If it's real enough to move people, it's real. Period. You've got something special, and the world deserves to hear it. Elijah sat silently for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. The Marshall Performing Arts Center loomed before them, grand and imposing. Inside, the lobby bustled with activity. Children in expensive clothes clutching sheet music, parents barking into phones, professional tutors giving last-minute advice. Dwayne felt underdressed in his borrowed suit as he guided Elijah through the crowd. Whispers followed them, curious stares at the blind black boy with his white cane and his cousin who clearly didn't belong in this world of privilege. Number 127, a production assistant called, checking her clipboard. That's us, Dwayne replied. Follow me. The panel is ready for you. The woman's eyes lingered on Elijah's cane before she turned and led them toward the auditorium. Elijah's grip tightened on Dwayne's arm. I'm scared, he admitted. That's how you know it matters, Dwayne replied. Now go show them what music really sounds like. The massive doors to the auditorium swung open. Bright lights, a gleaming grand piano, and a panel of judges waited within. Elijah took a deep breath as the announcer called his name. The auditorium hushed as Elijah was led to the gleaming grand piano at center stage. Behind a long table sat the three judges of Soundstage America's Next Virtuoso, their expressions varying from polite interest to outright skepticism. Our next contestant is Elijah Harris, age 9, from Oakwood Heights, announced the host, a woman with an overly bright smile and perfect teeth. At the judges' table, Langston Rowe leaned forward slightly. Even at 63, he commanded attention. Silver, hair perfectly styled, tailored suit impeccable, his dark eyes sharp and evaluating. Once considered among the finest pianists of his generation, he now wielded his reputation like a weapon, taking particular pride in separating the wheat from the chaff, as he often said in interviews. And what will you be playing for us today, young man? Asked Mary Ann Collins, the female judge, her voice warm and encouraging. Elijah hesitated, his hands tight around his cane. I don't exactly know yet. I usually just play what I feel. A low murmur rippled through the audience. In the wings, Dwayne closed his eyes briefly, wishing Elijah had stuck to their rehearsed answer. Langston's eyebrows rose. You don't know? This is a competition, not a playground improvisation session. I understand, sir, Elijah replied, his voice small but steady. But I promise I'll play something good. The third judge, James Wilder, chuckled. Well, I for one am intrigued. Let's hear what you've got, son. An assistant helped Elijah to the piano bench. He set his cane aside and adjusted his position, hands hovering above the keys. For a terrifying moment, he sat frozen. In the wings, Dwayne held his breath. Then Elijah's fingers touched the keys, and the first tentative notes of Mozart's Rondo alla Turca filled the auditorium. He started slowly, feeling his way. But as confidence grew, so did his tempo and expression. Halfway through, he seamlessly transitioned into Ray Charles's Georgia on My Mind, infusing the classical structure with soulful blues. The audience, stirred, surprised, and captivated. For his finale, Elijah shifted again, this time into an original jazz fusion piece with complex rhythms that had his small hands flying across the keyboard. When he struck the final chord, the auditorium erupted in applause. James Wilder was on his feet, and Mary Ann Collins pressed a hand to her heart, clearly moved. Only Langston Rowe remained expressionless, offering slow, deliberate claps that somehow cut through the enthusiasm like ice water. Well, said Mary Ann, beaming, I think we've just witnessed something extraordinary. Remarkable talent, agreed James. You have a natural gift, young man. Langston cleared his throat and the room fell silent. What we have here, he said, his voice cultured and precise, is an example of raw mimicry. Impressive memory, certainly, but memory is not artistry. Dwayne tensed in the wings as Elijah's face fell. "There's no discipline here," Langston continued. "No technique. Just a pastiche of copied sounds without understanding of the underlying structure or emotional intent. It's parlor tricks, not musicianship." "I have to strongly disagree," Marianne interjected. "This child has extraordinary innate talent." "Talent without training is worthless," Langston cut her off. "And I suspect what we're really responding to is the novelty. A blind child playing piano. How inspirational." The word dripped with sarcasm. "But this competition is about musical excellence, not feel-good stories." James leaned forward. "Let's vote, shall we?" "I say yes, absolutely yes." "Yes from me too," Marianne said firmly. "You have a beautiful gift, Elijah." All eyes turned to Langston. He sighed theatrically. "I'm afraid it's a no from me. And as our rules state, contestants need a unanimous vote to proceed to the callback round." A shocked silence fell over the auditorium. Elijah sat motionless at the piano, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. "Thank you for your time," Langston said dismissively, already making notes on his paper. Dwayne rushed onto the stage, his face tight with controlled anger as he helped Elijah up and handed him his cane. "You did amazing," he whispered. "Don't you forget that." As they walked off stage, Langston's voice carried through the microphone. "Blindness isn't an excuse for mediocrity," the audience gasped. A production assistant rushed to cut Langston's mic, but the damage was done. Elijah's shoulders hunched as if he'd been physically struck. By morning, the clip had gone viral, not as the inspiring moment Dwayne had hoped for, but as a controversial flashpoint. The blind boy virtuoso trended alongside Bar Langston Rowe. Some defended Elijah, calling Langston's comments cruel and discriminatory. Others sided with the famous pianist, arguing that standards shouldn't be lowered for anyone. A popular media blogger, who went by J Real, posted a scathing commentary. "When did we decide that crushing a child's spirit counts as entertainment?" Langston Rowe didn't offer critique. He offered public humiliation. And we all watched. Dwayne sat at his kitchen table scrolling through the reactions with growing dismay. His phone rang, Maureen's name flashing on the screen. He winced and answered. "Before you say anything," he began. "How could you?" Maureen's voice shook with rage and hurt. "Behind my back? Using my son like some kind of sideshow?" "I was trying to help," Dwayne protested. "You should have seen him play, Auntie. The whole place was on their feet." "I've seen the video," she cut him off. "I've seen my baby being torn apart by that man, while the whole world watches and comments. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Dwayne had no answer. "Stay away from us for a while," Maureen said, her voice suddenly tired. "I can't even look at you right now." In the days that followed, Elijah withdrew into himself. The piano at the community center sat untouched. At home, he spent hours in his room, headphones on, listening to music but no longer creating it. "He won't talk about it," Maureen told Pastor Lewis when he came to visit. "It's like something inside him just shut down." In the living room, Elijah sat motionless on the couch, face turned toward the window, though he couldn't see the afternoon, sunlight streaming through. "What if he's right?" Elijah asked suddenly when Pastor Lewis sat beside him. "Langston Rowe, what if I'm just a copy machine, not a real musician?" "Son, God doesn't make copy machines," Pastor Lewis replied gently. "He makes originals. Always. Has. Always will." Elijah nodded politely, but doubt had taken root, wrapping around his confidence like strangling vines. That evening, as Maureen sorted through the mail, she found an unusual envelope. Heavy cream-colored paper, with no return address, just their name and address written in elegant script. Inside was a handwritten note. "You have something. If you want to understand what it is, come find me. PN." Beneath the initials was an address in the countryside, about 2 hours from the city. Maureen immediately crumpled the paper, suspicious of any communication from strangers after the viral incident. But Elijah, hearing the crinkle of paper, asked about it. When Maureen reluctantly read him the note, something sparked in his expression, the first real interest he'd shown in days. "Please," he said simply, "I need to know." For 3 days, the mysterious note sat on the kitchen counter, a silent challenge that Maureen tried her best to ignore. Each time she passed it, her instinct to protect Elijah warred with her desire to see the spark return to his expression. It could be anyone, she argued, when Dwayne called, tentatively trying to mend their rift. Some weirdo who saw the video, some reporter looking for a story. Or it could be someone who can actually help him, Dwayne countered. "Let me check it out first. If it feels off, we leave. No questions asked." Maureen sighed, rubbing her temples. "You really think this is a good idea?" "I think doing nothing is worse," Dwayne said. "He's not playing Auntie, not even humming anymore. That man took something from him, and I'm partly responsible. Let me try to make it right." That Saturday, Dwayne drove Elijah through neighborhoods that gradually transformed from urban sprawl to suburban developments, and finally to rolling countryside. Elijah sat quietly in the passenger seat, but his posture had changed, alert, attentive to the sounds shifting around them as city noise faded into birdsong and wind through trees. "Smells different out here," he commented, rolling down his window. "Grass and trees instead of exhaust and trash," Dwayne replied with a half-smile. "Fancy people territory." They turned onto a long gravel driveway that wound through mature oak trees. As they rounded the final bend, a Victorian mansion came into view, its faded grandeur suggesting better days gone by. Wraparound porches with intricate woodwork framed the first floor, while tall windows punctuated the second story like watchful eyes. "We're here," Dwayne said, putting the car in park. "Big old house. Looks haunted." "Sounds quiet," Elijah observed. "Just one person here, I think." Dwayne helped Elijah up the worn stone steps to a massive oak door with stained glass inserts. He pressed the doorbell, hearing it echo inside. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then came the distinct tap of a cane on hardwood floors. The door swung open to reveal a woman in her late 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple black dress and leaned on an ornate wooden cane. Most striking was her face, handsome rather than pretty, with sharp cheekbones and penetrating eyes, one a clear gray, the other milky and sightless. "You're late," she said curtly, her voice carrying the refined accent of European classical training. "I expected you days ago." Dwayne blinked in surprise. "You sent the note? Are you PN?" She ignored him, fixing her gaze on Elijah. "You're the boy from the video, Elijah Harris." Elijah nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Dr. Penelope Nash," she said, stepping back from the doorway. "Come in. Just the boy. The young man can wait on the porch." "Now hold up," Dwayne began. "It's okay," Elijah said, reaching for his cane. "I'll be fine." Dwayne reluctantly let Elijah enter alone, watching as Dr. Nash led him through the foyer and out of sight. Inside, Elijah followed the sound of the woman's cane, noting the feel of polished wood beneath his feet and the subtle smell of lemon, polish, and old books. "In here," Penelope directed, opening a door that released a wave of sound. Not music, but the distinct acoustics of a room designed for it. The air felt different here, charged with potential. Elijah heard the whisper of fabric as Penelope settled herself at a piano. Without preamble, she began to play, but what emerged was nothing like conventional music. It was chaotic, dissonant, almost violent in its unpredictability. Notes clashed and collided, rhythms stuttered and lurched. When she abruptly stopped, the silence felt like a question. "Play it back," she commanded. Elijah hesitated only briefly before finding his way to the bench. His hands hovered over the keys, his head tilted as if replaying the sounds in his mind. Then he began to play, reproducing the chaotic sequence with remarkable fidelity. But he didn't stop where Penelope had. Instead, he pushed forward, taking the dissonance and gradually, intelligently resolving it, finding hidden patterns, creating structure from chaos, building to a conclusion that somehow made sense of everything that had come before. When he finished, the room fell silent again. "Interesting," Penelope said finally. "You didn't just copy, you completed." "I'm sorry," Elijah said. "I just heard where it wanted to go." Penelope made a non-committal sound. "Come with me." She led him to a small sitting room where tea had been laid out. As they sat, she studied him with her one good eye. "I don't take students anymore," she said bluntly. "Haven't for 15 years. Not since this." She gestured toward her blind eye. "What happened?" Elijah asked. "Detached retina. Surgery failed." Her tone was matter-of-fact. "The music world has little use for damaged goods. One day you're playing sold-out concert halls. The next you're being quietly replaced and forgotten." Elijah absorbed this. "Is that why you want to help me? Because we're both—" He trailed off. "Both what? Blind?" Penelope's laugh was short and sharp. "Please. Being blind is the least interesting thing about either of us." She set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "I want to help you because you have something genuine. Something that pompous fraud Langston Rowe wouldn't recognize if it bit him on his overpraised behind." At the mention of Langston's name, Elijah flinched slightly. "You know him?" he asked. "Oh yes," Penelope replied, her voice hardening. "We have history, Langston and I. Ancient history now." She stood abruptly. "I'll make you a deal, Elijah Harris. 3 days a week you come here. I'll teach you not just how to play but how to speak, to say the unspeakable through your hands. Not tricks, not copying, but true musical language." "Why?" Elijah asked simply. Penelope was quiet for a long moment. "Let's just say I have my reasons. Do we have a deal?" Elijah nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. We have a deal." The training began the following week. Dwayne drove Elijah to Penelope's estate on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Penelope proved to be as exacting as she was brilliant, demanding perfection not just in technique but in expression. "Again," she would say, tapping her cane for emphasis. "I don't want to hear the notes. I want to hear what's behind them." She taught him differently than conventional instructors, developing systems based on touch and sound rather than sight. They worked on sightless scale patterns, with Penelope physically adjusting Elijah's hands until muscle memory took over. She taught him theory by ear, connecting mathematical patterns to emotional resonances. "Music is mathematics made flesh," she told him. But too many players solve the equation without finding the meaning. The work was exhausting. Elijah's small fingers ached each night. Sometimes he grew frustrated, once even shouting, "I can't!" When a particularly difficult passage eluded him, Penelope had simply replied, "Then don't," and walked out, leaving him alone in the music room for 30 minutes before returning as if nothing had happened. Elijah never said "can't" again. As weeks passed, their relationship softened around the edges. Penelope began sharing stories of her career, performing for presidents and royalty, recording with legendary orchestras, traveling the world as one of the most celebrated pianists of her generation. "What happened between you and Mr. Rowe?" Elijah asked one afternoon as they took tea. Penelope was silent so long that Elijah thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice was different, quieter, with an old pain lurking beneath. "We were students together at the conservatory. Rivals, then briefly more than that. Then came the International Chopin competition, the most prestigious in the world. I was favored to win." She paused. "The night before the finals, Langston came to my room. He said he'd seen the judge's preliminary notes, said I had no chance." "Was he telling the truth?" Elijah asked. "No. He was sabotaging me. I performed terribly. My confidence shattered. He took first prize." Her teacup clinked as she set it down with precise control. "Later, he spread rumors that I'd been unstable, difficult to work with. Doors that should have opened for me remained closed." "That's awful," Elijah said softly. "That was Langston," Penelope replied, "always willing to destroy others to elevate himself. Nothing has changed." Their lessons intensified after that conversation. Penelope pushed Elijah harder, but there was new purpose in her instruction, as if she were arming him for a battle she knew was coming. At home, Maureen noticed the changes in her son, his growing confidence, his renewed passion. But she also worried. Some nights he practiced until his fingers cramped. Other nights he sat silently, listening to recordings with intense concentration. "I hardly see you anymore," she said one evening as they ate dinner. "School, Dr. Nash, practice. Where's my Elijah?" "I'm right here, Mom," he said, surprised. "I'm just learning so much." Maureen set down her fork. "Baby, I love that you're playing again, but I need to know this is still what you want, not what Dr. Nash or Dwayne want for you." Elijah considered this seriously. "It's what I want," he said finally. "When I play, I can see things, Mom. Not with my eyes, but I can see them. It's like the music makes pictures in my head." Maureen reached across the table and squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. "Then you keep playing. Just don't forget to be a kid sometimes too, okay?" In his downtown penthouse, Langston Rowe scrolled through social media on his tablet, frowning at another mention of the blind boy phenomenon. The viral clip of their confrontation had refused to die, keeping both Elijah and himself in the spotlight. His attention was caught by a new clip, shaky cell phone footage from what appeared to be a small jazz club. On a dimly lit stage stood Elijah, playing alongside a saxophonist and drummer, his small body swaying as his fingers flew over the keyboard. Langston watched with narrowed eyes, his expression shifting from dismissal to surprise to something like concern. The boy's playing had changed. There was structure now, intention, but also something hauntingly familiar in the phrasing, in the particular way certain chords were voiced. He played the video again, listening more carefully. Then he swore softly, setting down his drink with a sharp clink. "Penelope," he whispered. "You vindictive old witch." He picked up his phone and dialed his producer at soundstage. When the call connected, he didn't bother with pleasantries. "That blind boy from the auditions," he said. "Find out everything you can about him. Who he's studying with, where he's performing, everything." Elijah and Dwayne were leaving Penelope's estate when Dwayne's phone buzzed with a news alert. His eyebrows shot up as he read it. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. Listen to this. Soundstage just announced a second chance wildcard season. They're letting viewers vote on contestants who should get another shot." "So?" Elijah asked, buckling his seatbelt. "So Jay Reel, you know that blogger who's been covering your story, he's launching a campaign to get you voted back in." Elijah's hands went still. "I don't know if I want to go back." "Don't you?" Dwayne challenged gently. "After all the work you've been doing with Dr. Nash, this is your chance to show Langston Rowe what real music sounds like." In the silence that followed, both of them knew what the answer would be. Camera. Flashes popped like lightning as Elijah walked through the stage door of the soundstage studios, Penelope and Dwayne flanking him protectively. The scene was dramatically different from his first arrival. This time, journalists called his name, security guards cleared a path, and production assistants rushed to greet them. "America's favorite comeback kid," announced the show's host, meeting them in the green room. The votes were overwhelming, Elijah. You received more support than all other wildcard contestants combined. Penelope's expression remained impassive, but Dwayne couldn't hide his grin. After weeks of Jay Reel's relentless campaign, combined with the growing outrage over Langston's treatment of Elijah, public opinion had shifted decisively in the boy's favor. "Thank you for having me back," Elijah said politely, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Let me show you to your preparation room," the host said. "The other contestants are eager to meet you." As they followed her down the corridor, curious faces peered from doorways. Most offered encouraging smiles or nods, but one door remained, firmly closed, a gold star indicating it belonged to a featured performer. The preparation room was spacious and well-appointed, with a practice piano in one corner. No sooner had they settled in than a sharp knock came at the door. A production assistant entered, followed by a boy of about 12, immaculately dressed in what was clearly a designer suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his expression, combined curiosity with barely concealed disdain. "This is Amir Whitfield," the assistant announced, "one of our top-ranked junior virtuosos." "Nice to meet you," Elijah said, extending his hand. Amir shook it briefly. "So you're the charity case everyone's talking about." "Excuse me?" Dwayne stepped forward, but Penelope laid a restraining hand on his arm. "You heard me?" Amir continued, eyeing Elijah. "My father says the only reason they brought you back is for ratings. The blind boy versus the mean judge. Very dramatic." Elijah's face remained composed. "I'm here to play music, that's all." Amir laughed. "Right. Well, don't get too comfortable. Some of us have been training since we could walk." He glanced at Penelope. "No offense to your unorthodox methods, Dr. Nash." After Amir left, Penelope snorted. "Richard Whitfield's son. Hedge fund. Manager with more money than taste. Buys his boy the best teachers, the best instruments, the best opportunities." She shook her head. "But you can't buy soul." Later, as Elijah practiced in their room, another knock came. Softer this time. A young Asian girl with a violin case peered in hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I'm Zara Lynn." "Langston's protege," Penelope said, recognition in her voice. Zara nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say, I thought your audition was really beautiful. What Mr. Rowe said wasn't fair." Elijah smiled. "Thank you. Are you competing?" "Too. Yes," Zara replied, "but I didn't come to compare notes." Her eyes darted to the hallway, then back. "I just wanted to meet you. Your playing is different from what I'm used to hearing." "Different good or different bad?" Dwayne asked, protective instinct flaring. "Different real," Zara said simply. She glanced at her watch. "I should go. Mr. Rowe doesn't like me to socialize with competitors." After she left, Penelope sat thoughtfully at the piano beside Elijah. "Interesting," she murmured. "Langston always did prefer to keep his students isolated. Makes them easier to control." Training intensified. Each day, Penelope pushed Elijah into new territory, developing exercises that had no precedent in traditional piano education. She blindfolded him and rearranged the practice room, forcing him to navigate by sound and spatial memory. She played recordings of ambient noise, street sounds, crowds, kitchen clatter, while he performed, teaching him to maintain focus through distraction. "In competition, anything can happen," she warned. "A cough, a dropped program, a siren outside. You must play through it all." Most challenging were the emotional exploration sessions. Penelope would have Elijah sit silently, recalling specific memories. Dwayne's laughter, his mother's exhausted sighs after a double shift, the wail of sirens in his neighborhood, the silence of early morning before the city woke. "Now play that," she would instruct. Not what it sounded like, what it felt like. Initially, Elijah struggled. How did you translate feeling into sound? But gradually, a new vocabulary emerged in his compositions, textured, nuanced, deeply personal. "That," Penelope said after a particularly moving piece inspired by his mother, "that is what Langston can never touch. He plays notes. You play life." Backstage politics intensified as the competition progressed. Langston, furious at Elijah's return, began exerting his considerable influence. Equipment scheduled for Elijah's rehearsals mysteriously malfunctioned. His performance slots were rescheduled to less favorable times. Rumors circulated among the crew about his special treatment and questionable talent. The night before Elijah's first live performance, Dwayne overheard two technicians talking. "Rowe wants the kid gone," one said. "Says he's making a mockery of the competition. Seems personal," the other replied. "Everything's personal with Rowe," the first technician laughed. "Remember what happened to that composer last season? Criticized Rowe's new album, then suddenly couldn't get work anywhere." Dwayne reported. This to Penelope, who nodded grimly. "Langston hasn't changed. He'll try to destroy what he can't control." "Should we pull Elijah out?" Dwayne asked worriedly. And let Langston win again? Penelope's good eye flashed. Never. The first live performance arrived. The theme was light and shadow. Contestants were to select pieces that expressed contrast and duality. Backstage was organized chaos as final adjustments were made to lighting, sound levels, and camera positions. Elijah sat quietly in his dressing room, fingers moving subtly through practice patterns as Penelope reviewed last-minute instructions. Remember, the acoustics change when the audience is present. Trust your ear, not your memory. A production assistant appeared at the door. 5 minutes, Elijah. You're on after Amir. On the monitor in their room, they watched as Amir took the stage. His performance was technically immaculate, a complex Rachmaninoff piece executed with precision and flair. The audience applauded enthusiastically, though Penelope noted the response was respectful rather than moved. Perfect notes, she murmured. Perfect emptiness. As Elijah was led to the wings, he heard Langston's critique of Amir, effusive praise, that bordered on sycophantic. Then the host was announcing his name, and Elijah was being guided to the gleaming grand piano at center stage. The lights were hot on his face as he settled on the bench. The audience hushed, cameras zoomed, and 3 judges, including Langston Rowe, watched with varying expressions. In that moment of silence before the first note, Elijah felt a strange calm descend. He titled his piece, Finding Light in Dark, and from the first chord, it was clear this was no conventional classical performance. Beginning with a somber minor key exploration that evoked his early life of limitation, the piece gradually evolved, introducing elements of jazz, gospel, and finally an exultant, soaring melody that seemed to reach toward some unseen horizon. When the final notes faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the hall. The female judge wiped tears from her eyes. The third judge nodded appreciatively. Only Langston remained seated, his expression carefully neutral as he wrote on his scoring pad. The host approached Elijah with a microphone. That was extraordinary, Elijah. Can you tell us about your piece? It's about being blind, Elijah said. Simply, not as a tragedy but as a different way of seeing, finding light in unexpected places. The judges offered their feedback, the first 2 lavish with praise. When it came to Langston's turn, he cleared his throat. Technically improved, he acknowledged reluctantly, but fundamentally self-indulgent. Music should transcend personal circumstance, not wallow in it. 3 out of 10. A murmur of disbelief ran through the audience. The other judges looked shocked, but competition rules prevented them from challenging each other's scores. Backstage, Dwayne was furious. A 3? Are you kidding me? The audience was on their feet. Penelope seemed unsurprised. This was never going to be a fair fight, she said. But we've only just begun. The competition intensified. Elijah continued to draw standing ovations, while Langston continued to award him impossibly low scores. Other contestants showed varying reactions. Amir grew increasingly cold and competitive, while Zara seemed torn between loyalty to her mentor and growing admiration for Elijah's authentic expression. One evening, Zara appeared at Elijah's practice room door. "Can I listen?" she asked hesitantly. "Of course," Elijah replied, making room on the bench. She sat beside him, violin case clutched in her lap like a shield. As Elijah played a piece he was developing about his neighborhood, Zara's expression changed. Surprise, then wonder, then something like longing. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I've been playing since I was 3, she finally said. 8 hours a day, every day. Mr. Rowe says I could be the greatest violinist of my generation." She paused. "But I've never once played like that, like it was coming from inside." "What do you feel when you play?" Elijah asked. Zara considered. Concentration, precision, the need to get it right. She looked down at her hands. "Not joy, not like you." Before Elijah could respond, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "There you are." Langston Rowe stood in the doorway, his face tight with displeasure. "I've been looking everywhere, Zara. You missed our scheduled practice." "I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe," she said, standing quickly. I lost track of time. Indeed. His eyes moved from Zara to Elijah and back. We'll discuss this later. Come. As Zara gathered her things, she whispered quickly to Elijah, "Thank you for showing me something different." After they left, Penelope emerged from the adjacent room where she'd been listening. "You've awakened something in her," she observed. "Langston won't like that at all." The day before the elimination round, disaster struck. During Elijah's technical rehearsal, his piano bench collapsed without warning. He fell awkwardly, his wrist twisting beneath him with an audible crack. Medical staff rushed to the stage as Dwayne and Penelope pushed past security to reach him. Elijah's face was pale with pain as the on-set doctor examined his wrist. "It's a sprain," the doctor announced after careful examination. "Not broken, but he'll need to rest it for at least a week." "The elimination round is tomorrow," Dwayne protested. "Then he'll have to withdraw," the doctor said with a shrug. "No way around it." The producer looked distressed but resigned. "We can issue a statement about a medical withdrawal. It's unfortunate, but—" "No," Elijah interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm playing tomorrow." "Elijah, be reasonable," Maureen said, having been called to the studio. "You can't play with an injured wrist." "I can play with one hand," Elijah insisted. "I've been practicing pieces for left hand only. Penelope made me learn them in case something like this happened." Penelope nodded. "It's true. He can perform Scriabin's prelude for left hand. It's well within his capabilities." "But it's not what we rehearsed," the producer objected. "The lighting, the camera blocking." "Figure it out," Penelope said flatly. "Unless you want the media to know that a blind child was injured due to faulty equipment on your set." Hours. Later, as a stagehand collected the broken bench for routine inspection, Penelope ran her fingers along the freshly splintered wood where a support had been partially sawed through. "Definitely not an accident," she told Dwayne in a low voice. "Langston has escalated from sabotaging careers to causing physical harm." "We should report this," Dwayne urged. "With what proof?" Penelope asked bitterly. "It would be Langston's word against ours, and we all know who the industry believes." The next evening, Elijah took the stage with his wrist bandaged and supported in a brace. A murmur ran through the audience at the sight. As he was helped to the piano, the host quickly explained the situation, spinning it as an inspiring story of perseverance. Elijah settled himself, placing his right hand gently in his lap. For a moment he sat motionless, gathering himself. Then his left hand began to play, alone but somehow sounding full, complete. The melody singing above rolling bass notes as if two hands were at work instead of one. The piece was mournful yet defiant. Each note weighted with emotion. As he played, tears slipped silently down his cheeks, not from pain, but from the sheer effort of translating everything he felt into sound with half his usual resources. When the final note faded, the audience sat in stunned silence. Then someone stood. Then another. Soon the entire hall was on its feet, applause thundering like summer rain on a tin roof. Even the two supporting judges were visibly moved, rising to join the ovation. Only Langston remained seated, his expression unreadable as Elijah was carefully helped from the stage. Backstage, Penelope waited, her good eye bright with unshed tears. "You did it," she said simply, resting a hand on his shoulder. "That was everything I've taught you and more." Dwayne lifted Elijah into a gentle hug. "You killed it, little man. Absolutely killed it." As the celebration continued around him, Elijah sat quietly, exhausted but fulfilled. Beyond the curtain, he could hear the audience still applauding, calling his name. Whatever happened next, elimination or advancement, he had played his truth, and no one could take that away. The one-handed symphony, that's what social media had dubbed Elijah's performance within hours of the broadcast. Clips of his left-handed rendition of Scriabin's prelude had been viewed millions of times overnight. Comment sections overflowed, with reactions ranging from awe to accusations of exploitation. Some viewers broke down the technical brilliance of his adaptation. Others shared personal stories of how his resilience had moved them to tears. In his hotel room the morning after, Elijah sat quietly on the edge of his bed while Dwayne read him selected comments from his phone. Listen to this one. I've played piano for 30 years and couldn't do what this child did with one hand and a broken heart. Man, they love you out there. Elijah nodded, absently flexing his injured wrist. The pain had subsided to a dull throb, but the doctor had insisted he continue to rest it for at least another week. Any word on the results? He asked. Not until tonight's show, Dwayne replied. But after that performance, no way they can eliminate you. A knock at the door interrupted them. Penelope entered, followed by Maureen, who immediately went to Elijah and gently examined his bandaged wrist. How are you feeling, baby? She asked, concern etched on her face. I'm okay, Mom, really. Penelope cleared her throat. You should know that Langston is making the rounds this morning. He's scheduled an appearance on Morning Beat in 20 minutes. Dwayne swore under his breath. What's that snake up to now? They turned on the television just as Langston was being introduced. He looked impeccable as always in a tailored charcoal suit, his expression grave and professorial as the host asked about the previous night's performance. While I certainly admire young Elijah's determination, Langston began, his voice measured, I'm concerned that we're moving into dangerous territory. Soundstage has always been about musical excellence, not inspirational stories. But surely, the standing ovation speaks to the quality of his performance, the host pressed. Langston smiled thinly. Audiences are easily swept up in emotion. They're responding to the circumstance, a child playing through injury, not to the musicality itself. It's a circus act, not art, Maureen gasped. A circus act? My son poured his heart out on that stage. He's scared, Penelope said quietly. He sees the tide turning against him. On screen, the host looked uncomfortable. Some would say your criticism of Elijah has been unusually harsh, particularly given his age and circumstances. And that's precisely my point, Langston countered smoothly. Are we to judge him by a different standard because he's young, because he's blind? That would be the true discrimination. I respect him enough to hold him to the same rigorous standards as any other musician. The interview continued with Langston, skillfully positioning himself as the voice of artistic integrity against emotional sentimentality. When it ended, a heavy silence filled the hotel room. Will people believe him? Elijah asked finally. Some will, Penelope acknowledged. Langston has cultivated his reputation as the guardian of classical purity for decades. He has followers who hang on his every word. But others won't, Dwayne added firmly. People can recognize authenticity when they hear it. No sooner had he spoken than Dwayne's phone began buzzing with notifications. J-Reel had posted a scathing response to Langston's interview, complete with side-by-side comparisons of Langston's scores for technically similar performances by Elijah and other contestants. The hashtag #Dar Langston's bias was already trending. See? Dwayne said triumphantly. People aren't stupid. Maureen looked unconvinced. This is exactly what I was afraid of. My child becoming a social media battlefield. Mom, Elijah said softly, I want to keep going. This isn't just about the competition anymore. Across town, in a private practice room at the conservatory, Zara Lynn lowered her violin and stared at the sheet music before her. Though she couldn't see it, she could feel Langston's eyes on her, evaluating every movement, every breath. Again, he said flatly, you're rushing the third movement. Precision, Zara. Always precision. She raised her instrument and began the complicated passage once more, focusing intently on maintaining the exact tempo Langston demanded. Despite her flawless execution, she felt nothing, just the mechanical reproduction of notes on a page. Her mind kept drifting to Elijah's one-handed performance, how alive it had felt, how present. Stop, Langston interrupted sharply. Where are you today? Your body is here, but your mind is elsewhere. Zara lowered her violin. I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe, I'll focus better. Is this about the Harris boy? Langston asked, his voice dangerously soft. Zara's silence was answer enough. You've spent 8 years under my tutelage, Langston continued. Everything you are as a musician you owe to me. Remember that. Yes, Mr. Rowe. I've invested too. Much in you to watch you be seduced by cheap emotionalism. The boy plays for applause, not for art. Something in his tone, the dismissiveness, the certainty of his superiority, sparked an unfamiliar feeling in Zara. For the first time, she questioned not just Langston's assessment of Elijah, but his entire approach to music. His playing moved people, she said quietly. It moved me. Langston's eyes narrowed. Sentimentality is the refuge of the technically deficient. I thought I taught you better. Zara looked down at her violin, the expensive instrument Langston had helped her parents select, the symbol of everything she had worked for since childhood. Then she thought of Elijah, playing with one hand, tears streaming down his face, his music raw and real and alive. Maybe there are things you didn't teach me, she said so softly that Langston had to lean forward to hear her. Excuse me? Nothing, she replied quickly. I'll practice harder. But something had shifted, a crack in the foundation of certainty that had supported her musical life for as long as she could remember. 3 days after his one-handed performance, Elijah sat in Penelope's Victorian mansion, his injured wrist, propped carefully on a cushion as they worked on adapting his technique to accommodate the temporary disability. The competition continues in 2 weeks, Penelope said. The doctor believes your wrist should be healed enough by then, but will prepare as if it won't be. You think I'll make it through tonight's elimination? Elijah asked. After that performance, they wouldn't dare cut you. The backlash would be enormous. Penelope paused, her expression growing serious. But there's something else we need to discuss. Something I should have told you earlier. She settled into the armchair across from him. My history with Langston goes deeper than what I've shared. The competition, the sabotage, that was just the beginning. Elijah listened intently as Penelope revealed the full truth of her past. How Langston had not only undermined her confidence before the fateful competition, but had stolen her original composition, a piece she had shown him in a moment of trust. How he had claimed it as his own, using it as the cornerstone of his breakthrough album. How, when she threatened to expose him, he had systematically destroyed her reputation in the industry. By the time I lost partial vision in my eye, I was already a persona non grata in the classical world, she concluded. The injury just gave everyone an excuse to forget me entirely. That's why you left performing, Elijah said quietly. Not because of your eye. The eye was a convenient excuse, Penelope admitted. The truth was, I couldn't bear to be part of a world that had so thoroughly betrayed me. Elijah absorbed this in silence. Then, why tell me now? Because you need to understand what we're really up against. Langston doesn't just want to win a competition. He wants to maintain the system that has benefited him for decades. A system where the rules are written by people like him, for people like him. She leaned forward. And you, Elijah Harris, represent everything that threatens that system. Elijah nodded slowly. Then let's make music no one can steal. That evening, as expected, Elijah advanced to the next round of the competition. The judges didn't even attempt to justify Langston's low score in the face of Elijah's overwhelming audience support. The production had clearly made its decision. Elijah's story was ratings gold. With his advancement secured, Elijah threw himself into preparation with renewed vigor. Even with his wrist still healing, Penelope found ways to keep his training intensive. She taught him to shift weight distribution, to use deeper shoulder and back muscles instead of relying solely on wrist flexibility, to create fuller sounds with fewer notes. Before injury, you played with your hands, she instructed. Now you must play with your entire body, your entire being. On a physical level, it was grueling, but creatively, it sparked something new. Working around his limitation forced Elijah to think differently about composition, about expression. He began work on a suite he called The Streets of Sound, a sonic portrait of his neighborhood, his life experiences, his journey. Meanwhile, Zara's internal conflict intensified. After years of unquestioning obedience to Langston's methods, she found herself drawn to Elijah's rehearsal room whenever she could slip away. She would stand silently in the doorway, listening to him work through passages of The Streets of Sound, fascinated by how different his approach was from anything she had been taught. One afternoon, Langston caught her there. His face darkened as he pulled her aside. "This ends now," he hissed. "You are my student. You represent my legacy." "I was just listening," Zara protested. "To garbage," Langston snapped. "Undisciplined, self-indulgent noise. Is that what you aspire to? To play? For the cheap seats?" Something snapped in Zara. Years of suppressed feelings, frustration, doubt, creative suffocation, crystallized in that moment. "He plays with heart," she said, meeting Langston's gaze directly. "When was the last time you did that, Mr. Rowe? When was the last time you played without calculating every note's effect on your reputation?" Langston recoiled as if slapped. "You taught me how to play piano," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. "But Elijah taught me how to listen." She unpinned the small gold emblem of Langston's academy from her lapel and placed it in his palm. "I'm withdrawing from your mentorship." As Zara made her break from Langston, another contestant was unraveling. Amir Whitfield had watched with increasing alarm as Elijah's popularity surged. The son of a hedge fund manager who had invested millions in his musical career, Amir had been raised to believe that excellence was a product of privilege and opportunity. Elijah's raw talent challenged everything he had been taught about his own superiority. During a technical rehearsal, Amir approached Elijah in the wings, his normally perfect composure visibly cracking. "You think you're special," he said, voice tight with anger. "The blind boy wonder. You've turned this competition into a pity party." Elijah remained calm. "I'm just here to play music, Amir." "You're here to make the rest of us look heartless," Amir snapped. "Like we're the villains in your inspirational story. Well, I've worked too hard to let some charity case take my spotlight." He shoved Elijah then, not hard enough to hurt him, but enough to make him stumble. A nearby stagehand intervened, pulling Amir away as he continued to shout. "Mr. Rowe is right about you. You're a fraud, a gimmick." The incident was quickly contained, with producers warning Amir that another outburst would mean disqualification. But the damage was done. Word spread through the production, adding another layer to the drama unfolding both on and off camera. As Elijah's profile rose, so did the demands on his inner circle. Dwayne, who had been coordinating Elijah's schedule and serving as his unofficial manager, received an unexpected call from a youth outreach program in Atlanta. They were impressed by his work with Elijah and offered him a full-time position, working with at-risk teens in music education. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Stable work doing something meaningful, a chance to impact other kids the way he'd helped his cousin. But it would mean leaving at the most critical juncture of Elijah's journey. Dwayne agonized over the decision for days, not sharing the offer with anyone. The night before he had to give his answer, Elijah sensed something was wrong. "You're quiet. Tonight," he observed as Dwayne drove him back to the hotel after rehearsal. "Just thinking about stuff," Dwayne replied vaguely. "Is it the job in Atlanta?" Dwayne nearly swerved off the road. "How did you—" "I overheard you on the phone," Elijah admitted. "You should take it." "I can't leave you now," Dwayne protested. "Not with everything that's happening." "You've done enough," Elijah said firmly. "You believed in me when nobody else did. You got me here. Now I need to learn to stand on my own." "But what about Langston? All the pressure?" "I have Penelope. I have Mom, and now I have myself." Elijah smiled. "You taught me that." The conversation eased some of Dwayne's guilt, but the decision still weighed heavily on him. The competition had entered its most intense phase, and Langston's tactics were growing increasingly desperate. In his private office at the Soundstage Studios, Langston Rowe faced the show's executive producer across a desk littered with press clippings about Elijah. "This has gone far enough," Langston said coldly. "The competition has become a mockery." The producer sighed. "The ratings disagree with you, Langston. Viewers are invested in this story. They're watching a spectacle, not a music competition," Langston countered. "And you're letting it happen because it sells advertising. That's unfair. The boy has genuine talent. The boy," Langston interrupted, is a mediocre pianist being elevated beyond his abilities because of circumstances that have nothing to do with music. And you know it. The producer leaned back in his chair. What exactly are you asking for? I want him gone, Langston said flatly. Before the semifinals. That's not possible. The voting numbers, I don't care about the voting numbers. Langston's voice took on a dangerous edge. I've been the face of this show for 5 seasons. My reputation, my expertise is why audiences trust the outcomes. If you allow this farce to continue, I walk. The producer studied him carefully. You'd break your contract? Try me, Langston replied, and then explain to your board how you lost the only judge with any credibility in the classical world. The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, the producer spoke. I can't just eliminate him without cause. The backlash would be catastrophic. Then find a cause, Langston said simply. That's your job, isn't it? The semifinal assignment was announced with great fanfare. Each contestant would compose and perform an original 5-minute piece telling the story of who they are. For Elijah, it seemed almost too perfect. The streets of sound, the suite he'd been developing, with Penelope could be adapted to fit the requirements exactly. This is your moment, Penelope told him during their preparation session. Everything we've worked toward. Elijah's wrist had healed enough that he could play with both hands again, though he still wore a lightweight brace for support. He worked tirelessly, refining and polishing his composition until every note felt essential, every phrase authentic. 3 days before the semi-final performance, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. Langston called a special meeting of the judges and producers, presenting a folder of evidence he claimed proved that Elijah had plagiarized his compositions. I've obtained footage of the boy playing at his church over a year ago, Langston explained, showing a grainy video of Elijah's original church performance. Note the melodic structures, the chord progressions. Now compare them to his recent work. He played a recent clip from Elijah's rehearsal. The sophistication between these two performances is night and day, Langston continued. It's simply not possible for a child with no formal training to make such a leap without outside composition. I believe Dr. Penelope Nash has been writing his music for him. The accusation sent shockwaves through the production. The producers, legally obligated to investigate any claim of plagiarism, launched an immediate review. Elijah was informed that his semi-final performance was on hold pending the outcome. When word reached Penelope, her reaction was swift and furious. She stormed into Langston's dressing room without knocking, slamming the door behind her. How dare you, she said, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you accuse that boy of the very sin you committed against me? Langston turned from his mirror, his expression cool. Penelope, still dramatic after all these years. You know he composes his own music. You know it because you can hear me in it. Not because I wrote it, but because I taught him. The same way my teachers taught me and their teachers taught them. A 9-year-old blind boy without formal training suddenly composing at a conservatory level, Langston scoffed. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence is that he has a gift you've spent your whole life trying to acquire, Penelope shot back. Raw, authentic talent that connects with people on a level your technical perfection never could. Something flickered in Langston's eyes. A glimpse of old pain, quickly masked. This competition has standards. I'm simply upholding them. Penelope stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. This isn't about standards. This is about fear. You're terrified of being eclipsed by a child from the projects with more natural talent in his little finger than you've accumulated in a lifetime of privilege. She slapped a folder on the table, sheet music annotated with Elijah's creative process, dated notes from their sessions together showing the evolution of his compositions. Here's your evidence, she said coldly. Though I doubt it will matter to you, the truth never has. After she left, Langston sat motionless for a long time, staring at the folder but not opening it. Finally, he pushed it aside and returned to his reflection in the mirror, straightening his already perfect tie. When Elijah learned of the accusation, the news hit him like a physical blow. After everything he'd overcome, his blindness, his disadvantaged background, Langston's earlier humiliation, the injury, to now be called a fraud cut deeper than anything before. "I don't understand," he said quietly as Maureen held him. "Why doesn't he believe I can do this?" "It's not about you, baby," Maureen soothed, though her own anger simmered just below the surface. "Some people can't recognize light in others because they've lost it in themselves." Penelope was more blunt when she arrived at their hotel room. "He's desperate. He's throwing everything he has at you because he knows you're going to win." "But what if they believe him?" Elijah asked. "What if they think I can't really compose?" "Then you show them what cannot be denied," Penelope said. Firmly, "You go out there and play something so undeniably yours that no one can question its origin." As they strategized their response to the accusation, an unexpected visitor arrived, Zara Lynn, clutching a notebook to her chest, looking nervous but determined. "I heard what happened," she said when Dwayne let her in. "I want to help." She approached Elijah and pressed the notebook into his hands. "These are my compositions, ideas I've been working on secretly, things Mr. Rowe would never approve of. I've never shared them with anyone." Her voice softened. "This isn't pity. This is me passing the flame forward." Elijah ran his fingers over the pages. "Thank you, Zara, but I need to do this on my own." "I know," she replied. "I just wanted you to know you're not alone. There are others who believe in what you're doing, what you represent." After she left, the mood in the room had shifted subtly, a reminder that Elijah's struggle had implications beyond his own journey. The producer's investigation dragged on for 2 tense days. J-Reel's blog kept public pressure high with regular updates and pointed questions about the timing of Langston's accusations. Penelope's evidence of Elijah's compositional process was reviewed by independent music experts. Finally, on the morning of the semi-final, the producers announced their decision. Elijah would be allowed to perform. Langston was furious but powerless to overrule the decision. Instead, he turned his attention to Amir, his new favorite since Zara's defection. He spent hours coaching the boy, preparing him to overshadow Elijah's performance. Amir was scheduled to perform first. He took the stage looking confident but strained, the pressure of representing Langston's musical philosophy clearly weighing on him. His original composition was technically dazzling, a showcase of virtuosic runs, complex harmonies, and flawless execution. The audience applauded appreciatively when he finished, impressed by his skill if not moved by his expression. The judges offered their critiques, solid marks, with Langston predictably effusive in his praise. But as Amir left the stage, he could see the truth in the audience's polite but reserved response. Despite his perfect performance, he hadn't touched them. Something essential was missing. Backstage, he passed Elijah waiting in the wings. For a moment, Amir paused, looking as if he might speak. Instead, he simply walked past, head down, and didn't return to watch the rest of the performances. Later that evening, he would formally withdraw from the competition, leaving a brief note, citing personal reasons, and then it was Elijah's turn. The announcer's voice seemed to come from far away as he was led to the piano. The controversy surrounding his participation had created an electric atmosphere in the hall, anticipation mixed with curiosity, support tinged with doubt. Elijah settled himself at the piano, taking a moment to center his thoughts. This was it, the culmination of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd overcome. There would be no second chances after this. He began softly, with a simple melody evoking early morning in his neighborhood, distant sirens, mothers calling to children, the rhythmic bounce of basketballs on concrete. Gradually, he built in complexities, the layered sounds of urban life, the joy and struggle existing side by side. Church bells melded with hip-hop beats, classical structures twisted into jazz improvisations. As the piece progressed, Elijah poured everything into it, his blindness, his mother's sacrifice, Dwayne's belief, Penelope's guidance, the pain of Langston's rejection, the triumph of perseverance. The streets of sound became more than music. It became testimony. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, slowly, A single person stood. Then, another. Soon, the entire audience was on its feet, applause thundering through the hall. One of the judges openly wept. Another simply shook his head in wonder. Only Langston remained seated, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. As the ovation continued, something shifted in his expression. A crack in the facade, a glimpse of recognition that no amount of sabotage could diminish what they had all just witnessed. When the applause finally subsided, the host approached, with a microphone. "Elijah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like that in this hall. Can you tell us what inspired this piece?" Elijah smiled slightly. "It's about where I come from. Not just the place, but the people, the sounds, the feeling of it. Music is everywhere if you listen right." The judges offered their feedback, the two supporting judges lavishing praise that seemed inadequate for what they had just experienced. When it came to Langston's turn, the audience held its breath. "Technical precision is not everything," he said finally, his voice subdued. "There are times when raw expression transcends conventional standards." He paused. 8 out of 10. A murmur ran through the crowd, not the perfect score many felt Elijah deserved, but coming from Langston, it was tantamount to surrender. Backstage, the celebration was tempered by exhaustion and relief. Penelope hugged Elijah tightly. "You did it. You spoke your truth so clearly that even he couldn't deny it." Maureen wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, baby. So proud." Dwayne looked on, his own decision about the Atlanta job still weighing on him, but his heart full of pride for the boy he'd championed from the beginning. As the night wound down and the production team prepared for the next day's broadcasts, a producer approached their group. "Congratulations, Elijah. That was truly special." His tone changed slightly as he continued. "However, I should inform you that there's been a protest lodged by one of the judges regarding your advancement. While the audience response was clearly positive, your finalist spot is not yet guaranteed." The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples of shock spreading through Elijah's team. After everything, the performance of a lifetime, the standing ovation, even Langston's grudging acknowledgement, they were still facing resistance. "On what grounds?" Penelope demanded. The producer looked uncomfortable. "I'm not at liberty to say. The competition committee will review and make a final decision by morning." As he walked away, Dwayne swore under his breath. "Langston, it has to be. He just won't quit." Maureen put her arm around Elijah's shoulders. "What now?" Elijah stood quietly for a moment, processing this latest twist. Then, surprisingly, a small smile formed on his lips. "Now we wait," he said calmly. "The music has been played. It's out there. No one can take that away." In that moment, standing in the shadows of the stage where he'd just bared his soul, Elijah Harris seemed older than his years, a child who had faced rejection and doubt and pain, and somehow transformed it all into something beautiful. Whatever came next, he had already won the battle that mattered most. The news of Langston's protest broke overnight. By morning, Let Elijah Play was trending nationwide, with celebrities, musicians, and former soundstage winners joining the outcry. The show's social media accounts were flooded with comments demanding transparency. 3 sponsors had already contacted the network with concerns about their brand association. In the hotel lobby, Elijah sat beside Maureen, listening to Dwayne read the latest updates from his phone. "They're feeling the heat," Dwayne said. "No way they can keep you out now." Penelope, who had been on the phone in the corner, rejoined them with a determined expression. "I've spoken with some old colleagues who still have influence. They're making calls." A news crew had set up outside the hotel, hoping for a statement. The producer who had delivered last night's bombshell now approached their group, looking harried. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "the network would like to offer you and Elijah an opportunity to share your perspective. A brief interview before the committee's decision is announced." Maureen hesitated, protective instinct warring with the awareness that public opinion was their strongest ally. "I don't want my son exploited for ratings." "It's not like that," the producer insisted. The audience deserves to hear from Elijah directly. After a brief family conference, they agreed. An hour later, Maureen sat across from a sympathetic interviewer, Elijah beside her. The camera captured her worn face, the lines etched by years of struggle as she spoke about raising her son. "It's never been easy," she admitted. "When he was born 3 months early and they told me he would never see, I thought my heart would break. When his father walked out, I thought I couldn't do it alone." Her voice grew stronger. "But Elijah taught me what strength really means. He's never once used his blindness as an excuse or asked for special treatment." "What does this competition mean to you?" the interviewer asked Elijah. "It started as just a chance to play music," he replied thoughtfully. "But now it's about showing people that your circumstances don't define what you can create. That music belongs to everyone." The interview was broadcasting live, and within minutes clips were circulating online. Viewers were particularly moved by Maureen's quiet dignity and Elijah's mature perspective. Public sentiment, already strongly in Elijah's favor, crystallized into a movement. Back in Atlanta, Dwayne received a text from the Youth Outreach Program. They needed his decision today. He stepped outside to make the call, walking slowly around the hotel grounds as he wrestled with his choice. A career doing meaningful work or standing by his cousin in his moment of need. The responsible path forward, or loyalty to the journey he'd helped start. On the third lap around the building, Dwayne stopped walking. He looked up at the hotel windows, knowing Elijah was somewhere inside, waiting for news that would determine his future. Then he made the call. "I appreciate the opportunity," he told the program director, "but I can't accept the position right now. There's something I need to finish first." When he returned to the hotel room, Elijah sensed the change immediately. "You turned down the job." "For now," Dwayne confirmed. "Some things are more important." "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Dwayne squeezed his shoulder. "You're the change we've all been waiting for. I'm not leaving now." Before Elijah could respond, Penelope entered the room, her face alight with barely suppressed excitement. "It's happening," she announced. "The committee just overruled Langston's protest. You're advancing to the final." The room erupted in cheers, tension dissolving into relief and joy. As they celebrated, a production assistant arrived with official confirmation and additional news. Elijah would face Zara Lynn in the final round. Amir's withdrawal had created an opening, and Zara's semifinals performance had earned her the spot. "The final will be a 2-part challenge," the assistant explained. "First, an original composition performed solo. Then, a collaborative piece created and performed by both finalists together." After the assistant left, Maureen expressed concern about the collaboration. "Can you work with Langston's student? Won't he influence her against you?" "Zara's not under his control anymore," Elijah reminded her. "And she's a brilliant musician in her own right." Penelope nodded approvingly. "A generous assessment. You'll need that spirit of collaboration for the duet portion." The next morning, as they prepared to leave for Penelope's home to begin work on the final pieces, she surprised Elijah with an announcement. "I won't be coming with you to the final," she said quietly. "What? Why not?" Elijah asked, alarmed. "Because you don't need me anymore." Penelope took his hands in hers. "You've found your voice. Now you need to trust it completely, without looking to me for validation." "But, no buts." Her tone was gentle but firm. "Every musician must eventually step away from their teacher. This is your moment, not mine." She pressed something small and cool into his palm, a locket on a thin chain. "Inside is a recording chip with my first concert when I was 12. Before critics, before Langston, before everything went wrong. Just pure music." Elijah closed his fingers around it, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you. For everything." "Thank me by playing your truth," Penelope said, embracing him. No matter what happens, the night before the final, Elijah was in his practice room at the studio when an unexpected visitor arrived. The familiar tap of expensive shoes on the hallway floor made him pause at the piano. "Mr. Rowe," he said, turning toward the door. How? Did you know? Langston asked, genuinely curious. Everyone walks differently, Elijah explained. Yours is deliberate, like you want each step to make a statement. Langston considered this, then entered the room fully, closing the door behind him. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied the boy at the piano. You're better than me, he finally said, the words seeming to cost him physically. Not because you can play, though your talent is considerable, but because you feel. I forgot how. The admission hung in the air between them. What happened? Elijah asked simply. Langston moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Success. Acclaim. The constant pressure to be perfect, to justify my position. After a while, you start playing for the critics, not for yourself. And one day you realize the music doesn't move you anymore. That sounds lonely, Elijah observed. Langston gave a short, humorless laugh. It is. He turned back to Elijah. I've been unfair to you. Cruel, even. I saw in you something I lost long ago, and it frightened me. I understand, Elijah said, with a wisdom beyond his years. Don't. Langston's voice hardened briefly. Don't be so quick to forgive. What I did was unforgivable. He moved toward the door, then paused. Play your heart tomorrow, not for the judges, not for the audience, for yourself. With that, he was gone, leaving Elijah to wonder if the strange encounter had been some kind of test, a final mind game, or perhaps, most surprisingly, a genuine moment of humanity from a man who had seemed incapable of it. The morning of the final dawned clear and bright. The theater buzzed with anticipation as the audience filled every seat. Critics, industry executives, music teachers with their students, all had come to witness what had become the most talked-about competition in soundstage history. Backstage, Elijah and Zara met to rehearse their collaborative piece one last time. Titled Resonance, it blended his gospel jazz storytelling with her classical precision. Working together over the past week, they had developed a genuine mutual respect that transcended competition. Nervous? Zara asked as they finished their run-through. Terrified, Elijah admitted with a smile. You? Always. She adjusted her violin slightly. But it's different now. Before, I was afraid of making mistakes. Now I'm afraid of not saying, enough with the music. That's a better kind of fear, Elijah observed. The stage manager called for places. Before separating to their respective preparation areas, Zara impulsively hugged Elijah. Whatever happens, thank you, she whispered, for showing me another way to play. The final began with individual performances. Zara played first, a hauntingly beautiful piece that showcased both her technical brilliance and her newly awakened expressiveness. The audience responded warmly, with Langston watching from the judges' table, his face unreadable. Then it was Elijah's turn. As he was guided to the piano, he felt Penelope's locket against his chest, a talisman of everything that had brought him to this moment. He settled himself, took a deep breath, and began. Braille in the Sky started softly, almost tentatively, a musical representation of how he imagined colors, shapes, the world he had never seen. The melody asked questions, reached outward, building gradually as it explored the landscape of imagination. Unlike the raw emotion of his semi-final piece, this composition was more nuanced, more introspective, a journey through inner rather than outer space. As he played, Elijah created a sonic dreamscape that allowed the audience to experience the world as he did, through sound, through touch, through the heart's perception. The piece climaxed with a section of such transcendent beauty that it seemed to suspend time itself before resolving into a gentle, peaceful conclusion. When the final note faded, the silence was profound. Then came the applause, building slowly at first, then erupting into a standing ovation that continued for minutes. People embraced strangers beside them, moved beyond words. Even the most hardened critics were visibly affected. At the judges' table, Langston stood with the others, his eyes suspiciously bright. After the applause finally subsided, Elijah and Zara returned to perform Resonance. Their instruments conversed, argued, reconciled, and ultimately harmonized in a piece that seemed to embody the entire journey of the competition itself. Conflict transformed into cooperation, difference becoming strength. When they finished, the ovation was immediate and unanimous. Something special had happened on that stage, something beyond competition, beyond individual achievement. Music had done what it does best, connected human beings across all barriers. The moment of announcement arrived. Elijah and Zara stood center stage, hands clasped in mutual support rather than rivalry. The host opened the envelope with theatrical flourish, and the winner of this season's soundstage, America's Next Virtuoso, is... The pause seemed eternal. Elijah Harris. The theater erupted. Zara turned and embraced Elijah warmly as confetti fell around them. Maureen and Dwayne rushed onto the stage, enveloping him in a group hug. In the judges section, the two supporting judges applauded enthusiastically while Langston offered a respectful nod of acknowledgement. At home, watching on television, Penelope Nash smiled through tears, her mission complete. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Kennedy Center hummed with anticipation. Tonight marked Elijah Harris's debut with the National Symphony Orchestra, the culmination of a whirlwind half-year that had transformed him from reality show contestant to genuine musical phenomenon. Backstage, Elijah adjusted his bow tie, fingers moving with the same precision they brought to the keyboard. At 10 years old, he was still adjusting to the trappings of fame, the formal attire, the protocol of professional performance, the weight of expectation. 5 minutes, Mr. Harris, a stagehand called. Maureen, elegant in a simple evening gown, provided by one of Elijah's new sponsors, squeezed his hand. Ready, baby? Ready, Mom. His smile was confident but still boyish. Is Dwayne here yet? Just arrived. His flight from Atlanta was delayed. Since accepting the youth outreach position, 3 months ago, Dwayne had been building a music program for at-risk teens inspired by Elijah's journey. He flew in for all of Elijah's major performances, maintaining the bond that had started everything. As Elijah prepared to take the stage, his phone buzzed with messages of support from Zara in Vienna, where she'd been accepted to the prestigious conservatory. From Jay Reel, whose blog had expanded into a full media platform advocating for arts accessibility. From former contestants and new friends made along the way. Notably absent was any word from Langston Rowe, who had resigned from soundstage after the finale and retreated from public life. Rumors circulated about a nervous breakdown, a health crisis, or simply a long overdue reckoning with his past. Whatever the truth, he had vanished from the musical landscape he once dominated. In Tokyo, 3 months later, Elijah performed to a sold-out audience at Suntory Hall. At 12, Zara Lynn sat in the front row, having arranged her European tour. To coincide with his Japanese dates, they had maintained their friendship, occasionally performing their duet, Resonance, at charity events. After the performance, they met for tea in the hotel lounge, comparing notes on their rapidly evolving careers. Paris next month? Zara asked. Then Cape Town, Elijah confirmed. You're still with the Vienna program? Yes, but I'm taking a different direction than expected. Zara stirred her tea thoughtfully. I'm focusing more on education now, teaching children from non-traditional backgrounds. Because of what happened? With us? Partly, she smiled. You changed more than just my playing, you know. You changed how I see music's purpose. As they spoke, Zara's phone chimed with a notification. Her expression shifted as she read it. What is it? Elijah asked. A former student of Mr. Rose just posted something interesting, she said slowly. Apparently, he's funding a new school for musicians with disabilities. Anonymously, but word got out. Elijah absorbed this silently, thinking of their strange conversation the night before the final. I'm glad, he said finally. Everyone deserves a second movement. Back in the States, Amir Whitfield's path had taken an unexpected turn. After his abrupt withdrawal from the competition, he had disappeared from public performance for several months. When he re-emerged, It was not on the competition circuit, but as a volunteer at an inner-city music center. One afternoon, a letter arrived at Elijah's management office, handwritten on expensive stationery. "Dear Elijah," it read, "you beat me without trying to, but you made me better. The music I'm finding now, working with kids who play for joy rather than perfection, feels real in a way nothing in my previous life ever did. Thank you for that. Unwitting gift. Amir." Meanwhile, Penelope Nash received her own surprising invitation to rejoin the musical world as a judge, composer, and teacher at Juilliard. The offer was prestigious, validating, everything she had once dreamed of. Before Langston's betrayal and her own retreat, she declined. "I've already left my masterpiece out there," she told the board chairman, gesturing toward a newspaper featuring Elijah's latest triumph. Some things can't be improved upon. Instead, she focused on her private teaching, accepting a small number of students with unusual gifts and circumstances, children who, like Elijah, might otherwise fall through the cracks of traditional musical education. On a crisp autumn evening, a year after the competition, Elijah returned to New Hope Baptist Church. The humble sanctuary was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles and spilling out into the foyer. Despite offers to perform in grand cathedrals and concert halls throughout the city, he had insisted that this concert, a benefit for music education in underserved communities, be held where his journey began. As he made his way to the piano, a hush fell over the congregation. Among them sat the woman who had recorded his first viral video, her phone ready once again. Beside her was Dwayne, home from Atlanta for the weekend. Maureen watched from the front row, her face reflecting pride and a mother's perpetual concern. For her child in the spotlight, Elijah adjusted the microphone beside the piano. "Tonight I want to play something new for you. It's called Braille in the Sky, and it's about how I see the world, not with eyes, but with heart and sound and feeling." His fingers touched the keys, and the familiar opening notes filled the church. But something was different. The piece had evolved, matured, grown deeper in the years since the competition. It now contained echoes of his travels, new experiences, broader horizons. As he played, faces in the audience reflected the journey they had witnessed. From a small boy at a dusty community center piano to a young artist who had captured the world's imagination. The woman with the phone recorded through tears, just as she had that first Sunday morning. In the months that followed, Elijah's star continued to rise. He performed around the world, Tokyo, Paris, Cape Town, Sydney, always returning to his roots. Between international tours, he gave free concerts in community centers, taught workshops for visually impaired children, and collaborated with musicians across genres and generations. Dwayne's youth program flourished, expanding to 3 additional cities. Using Elijah's story as inspiration, he created opportunities for talented kids from struggling neighborhoods to receive the guidance and support they needed to develop their gifts. Maureen finally quit her exhausting job as a nurse's aide, instead managing Elijah's increasingly complex affairs. In a quiet moment between concerts, she told him, "You didn't just change your life. You changed mine." "We did it together, Mom," he replied, the wisdom in his young voice reflecting all they had overcome. 5 years after the competition that had started everything, an older Elijah Harris sat alone on an empty stage. At 14, he had grown taller, his face beginning to show the transition from child to young man. His fingers, longer now, rested lightly on the keys of a grand piano. The concert hall was silent, the audience long gone after another successful performance. In these private moments after shows, Elijah often played just for himself, music too personal, too experimental for formal programs. He took a deep breath, centering himself in the perfect acoustic space. Silence. Then, a single note, the beginning of something entirely new. Not the streets of sound or Braille in the sky, but a composition still forming, still becoming, just as he was. As the notes unfurled into the empty hall, they carried the essence of his journey, the hardship and the triumph, the doubt and the certainty, the darkness and the light. But most of all, they carried the truth he had discovered along the way. That sometimes, the most beautiful music comes from those who hear the world differently. The sound expanded, filling the space, with possibilities, with futures yet to be written. And as the final chord resolved into silence, Elijah smiled, ready for whatever came next. Have you ever wondered what beautiful music we miss because we're too busy looking instead of truly listening? This is the gift Elijah Harris gives us all. A reminder that the most powerful visions can come from those who see the world differently. If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more narratives that challenge our perceptions and open our hearts.